Christmas Eve, a time when homes glow with warmth, when families gather to exchange laughter and love. But for one young woman, it was the night everything changed. Picture this. The snow falls softly, blanketing the streets in silence. And under the glow of festive lights, a teenage girl stands alone. Her suitcase is her only company, the weight of it matched only by the burden in her heart. This wasn't just any winter evening. It was the night her family turned their backs on her. They said she was too much trouble. They said there was no space for her anymore. And so, as carolers sang in the distance and neighbors celebrated, she walked away into the freezing night, wondering how it all came to this. Who was this girl? What led to this moment? And what kind of family sends their child out into the cold on Christmas? This is a story of heartbreak, survival, and a return no one could have anticipated. It's not just a tale of redemption. It's a reminder of the strength we carry even when we're left with nothing. This Christmas, we unravel the truth behind a decision that shattered a family and a comeback that left everyone speechless. Her name was Megan. From the outside, she seemed like any other teenager in a typical suburban family. Tree-lined streets, holiday traditions, and the unspoken promise of love and support. But not everything was as it seemed. Family photographs show a smiling girl, but behind the snapshots lay a storm no one saw coming. Megan wasn't just any daughter. She was a dreamer, full of ambition and energy. Yet, for reasons still unclear, her parents viewed her differently, labeling her a source of endless frustration. And as tensions rose in their home, the unthinkable happened. A decision that would define their family forever. It was the kind of argument that starts small but quickly spirals out of control. Megan, barely 18, was determined to follow her dreams. She spoke of ambitions that her parents didn't understand, of a future they couldn't see. Her voice rose with passion, met by the sharp edge of her father's frustration. Her mother, standing by the kitchen counter, folded her arms tightly, as if bracing for the storm. "You're too much trouble," her father said, his words cold and deliberate. Megan froze. She had heard the whispers, felt the tension at the dinner table, but never expected this moment to come. "If you can't live by our rules, you can't live under this roof." The silence after those words felt louder than the shouting that preceded them. Megan's face flushed with shock and anger, but she didn't cry. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed to her room, her heart pounding as she grabbed what she could: a suitcase, a handful of clothes, and a small box of keepsakes. By the time she reached the front door, her parents hadn't moved. They stood frozen in the living room, watching her leave, saying nothing. Megan's breath was visible in the cold night air as she stepped outside. The door shut behind her with a finality that made her chest tighten. She walked down the snow-covered driveway, her boots crunching with every step, and disappeared into the dark. Megan didn't know where to go. It was Christmas Eve, and the streets were eerily quiet. Every window glowed with warmth, but Megan was out in the cold, her breath shallow from the biting wind. She dragged her suitcase behind her, each step heavier than the last. She tried calling friends. Some didn't answer. Others were hesitant. "It's Christmas, Megan," one said awkwardly, before hanging up. By the time she found someone willing to take her in, her fingers were numb from the cold, and her feet ached. That night, she slept on a friend's couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. But the next morning, reality hit her harder than the night before. She had no plan, no savings, and no way to rely on anyone for long. As her friend's family gathered for Christmas breakfast, Megan realized she couldn't stay. She packed her bag again and left, back out into the freezing streets. But Megan wasn't the type to give up. She had always been determined, even when the odds were stacked against her. Using what little she had, Megan scraped together enough for a small room in a shared apartment. It wasn't much, just a bed, a desk, and a single window, but it was hers. She found a part-time job as a cashier during the day, and enrolled in night classes at the local community college. While her peers partied or went home to their families, Megan stayed up late, poring over textbooks. She had always dreamed of being a lawyer, and now that dream was the only thing keeping her going. The long days and sleepless nights took their toll, but Megan refused to let the exhaustion win. With each passing semester, she inched closer to her goal, proving to herself and to the world that she could do it. She didn't need anyone's approval, she just needed her own determination. After years of relentless effort, Megan finally stood where she had once only dreamed of being, at her law school graduation. The cheers of her classmates filled the auditorium, but Megan only thought of one thing: the road it had taken to get here. Her first job as an attorney wasn't glamorous. She worked long hours, tackling case after case, but each one reminded her of how far she had come. Megan's tiny shared apartment became a motto loft, and her beat-up secondhand car was replaced by one fresh off the lot. But her success wasn't just material. For Megan, it was proof that she could build a life on her own terms. She had taken the rejection that broke her heart and turned it into fuel for her ambition. And while she never forgot the pain of that Christmas Eve, she began to wonder if it was time to confront the past. After all, she wasn't the same girl who walked out into the snow all those years ago. She drove down to visit her mother and got out of the car and felt the cool snow on her face. She was someone her parents wouldn't even recognize. After years of silence, Megan finally decided it was time. She had built a life that far surpassed even her own expectations. She had faced every challenge head-on, but one thing still lingered in the back of her mind: the night she walked away from her family. The years had softened the anger but left behind questions that only her parents could answer. One evening, after rehearsing her words for hours, Megan picked up the phone. The sound of the ringing filled the silence of her apartment, and with every passing second, her heart beat faster. "Hello?" a voice finally answered. It was her mother. Megan froze for a moment, unable to speak. Then she said the words she'd been holding on to for so long. "Mom, it's me." The line was quiet for a beat too long. Then came the reply, shaky but unmistakable. "Megan? Is it really you?" The conversation was awkward at first, tentative, careful. They spoke for hours, and by the end, Megan had made a decision. She was going home. The drive to her parents' house felt surreal. As she pulled into the driveway, memories of that fateful Christmas Eve came rushing back. The same house, the same door she had walked through as a child, and the same door that had closed behind her years ago. She took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked to the door. When her parents opened it, there was a moment of stunned silence. Her father looked at her as if he were seeing a ghost, and her mother's hand went to her mouth. Neither of them spoke right away. Then, without a word, her mother stepped forward and hugged her, holding on tightly as though afraid she might disappear again. Megan felt the weight of years lift as she stood there in her mother's arms. Inside, the house looked the same furniture, the same holiday decorations, even the same faint scent of pine. But it wasn't the same for Megan. She felt like a stranger in a place that had once been her entire world. Her parents sat across from her at the kitchen table, the air heavy with unspoken words. Megan opened her bag and pulled out an old photo album. She slid it across the table to them, and together they began flipping through the pages. There she was as a child, her first Christmas, her school plays, her high school graduation. Each photo carried a memory, and with each memory, the barriers between them began to crumble. "I didn't know how to help you," her father finally said, his voice low. "I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now that I failed you." Megan looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I wasn't easy to deal with, I know that now, but I never wanted to be a burden." The three of them talked late into the night, sharing stories, regrets, and finally, apologies. It wasn't easy, but it was a start, and for Megan, it was enough. Rebuilding trust wasn't something that happened overnight. There were still awkward moments, still things left unsaid. But over time, Megan and her parents found a rhythm. They started inviting her over for dinners, then family gatherings. Eventually, she brought them to her own home, showing them the life she had built from scratch. For the first time in years, they celebrated Christmas together. The decorations, the tree, the laughter. It was everything Megan had longed for, and while the wounds of the past couldn't be erased, they no longer defined their relationship. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far they had come. Today, Megan channels her experience into helping others. She volunteers at a local youth center, mentoring young adults who are struggling with challenges of their own. She tells them her story, not to dwell on the pain, but to show them what's possible when you refuse to give up. For Megan, life has come full circle. What began as a story of rejection and heartbreak has become a story of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Her journey reminds us all that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones rebuilt from broken pieces. Megan's story isn't just hers. It's a testament to the strength we all carry and the hope that, no matter how far apart we drift, it's never too late to find our way back home.